Hello and welcome to round 2 of the GSC 100% Championship provided by RCL, and we are at Curitiba for round 2 of the championship. Once again, Jan Larsen took pole, followed by Dave Ellis, and then it was Neil Askoff, Nick Ovey, Matt By and Nigel Lee were the top 6. James Reed was 7th, 8th went to Sim Steele, 9th went to Kramer, 10th was Herrera, and 11th was Andrew Jones. A much cleaner formation lap this time than last week. And we are now green and racing for round 2. Askoff got a great start. Went down the inside of Larsen into turn 1 and down the inside of Ellis. However, there was chaos caused as Ovey outbraked himself and gave Larsen a love tap, which sent Ovey halfway around, and Larsen somehow managed to hold on to it. On board with Ovey. There's Ellis on the left, that's Larsen in the middle. Askoff takes the lead by going down the inside. Then Ovey a tad too late on the brakes, and there's the contact. Reed just barely manages to get through. This is on board from Nigel Lee's perspective. Not much room to get through there. By was out wide on the exit of that corner, which was giving opportunity for other cars to overtake. And this is on board from James Reed, who just barely managed to get through that gap there. He ended up in 6th after the first corner. And now back to the action. This is Jan Larsen going back down the inside of Askoff to take first. And at the same time, Ellis was trying to get his way past Matt By. This meant that James Reed now found himself behind Nigel Lee for the second race in a row. And we know what happened last time they were together. Matt By and Dave Ellis still battling, and once again James Reed runs into the back of Nigel Lee for the second race in a row. That dropped Reed all the way down to last, and Lee managed to carry on. Back at the front, Matt By went back down the inside of Ellis into the first corner to put himself back into third in the race. And whilst that was happening, Andrew Jones also felt like he wanted to overtake 2 cars at once. But before that happens, Ellis is trying to get past Matt By, who runs wide. And it's kept Matt By ahead of Ellis for now. By wide on the exit of the hairpin. Ellis trying to get a better run. Thinks about going into the inside in this flat out chicane, but thinks better of it. And then of course Matt By makes a mistake. And luckily he manages to avoid contact with the wall. That dropped him all the way down behind Lee, and there goes Herrera. This is Andrew Jones, like I was saying earlier. He overtook Lee and Herrera in one big move down the start finish straight. And to finish things off, Lee gave Herrera a little tap into the first corner. So that put Herrera down another position. Next up was Lee trying to overtake Jones, and he got a better run onto the start finish straight and pulled alongside using slipstream and was past Andrew Jones before the first corner. by recovering back through the field. Andrew Jones ran wide at the hairpin, which gave By the opportunity to get past coming into the final sector of the lap. Jones with a much better performance so far in this race. Next up, Steele had found himself up with Kramer for the second race in a row as well. Kramer made a mistake into the first corner, and Steele looked like he could get round the outside because of Kramer's mistake. Almost making contact coming down the straight, and Nigel Lee wasn't too far behind these two. Kramer managed to hold the position by taking the inside line into the next corner. That was how it remained for another lap. Andrew Jones, meanwhile, was having a terrible lap. First he hit the outside wall on the first turn, and then coming into the final sector he got all out of shape and gave the barrier on the outside a hard whack. I'm surprised his car was still going at this point, and that let Herrera back past him. And then Kramer made a mistake coming out the hairpin, which allowed Steele to go through, and Nigel Lee followed him. And to finish off Andrew Jones' poor couple of laps, in the same place as last lap, he got sideways worse than he did last time, through the air and hit the wall, which completely killed the car. And that was his race done and dusted after just 9 laps. On board now. That was a hard hit into the wall there. Ellis was slowly catching Askov, and coming into the first corner it looked like he braked just a tad too late and barely avoided contact with Askov. Lee had now pulled himself right up behind Steele, and as they came into the first corner he made the move. Just about. Didn't have a very good exit though, and so Steele was managing to stay with him. He had a run going around the outside of the next corner, but that wasn't going to work. He tries to do the switchback, but Lee covered off the line and they stayed in those positions. Lee, just a bit later on in the lap, was then the first car to make a pit stop. The only problem was, Lee accelerated before the speed limit line and picked himself up a penalty. Next up was Askov pitting, which gave Dave Ellis some free air to try and catch Jan Larsen, who was still leading at this point. Askov's stop didn't go according to plan though. And he stalled it once. Stalled it twice. And on the third attempt he eventually managed to get the car going. That cost him a lot of time and dropped him somewhere in the midfield as Herrera comes in to make his first pit stop of the race. And just like Nigel Lee, Askov accelerated away too early and became the second driver to pick up a penalty. Herrera later doing the same. Ellis now pitted from second and was the first driver of the 4 that had, 3 even, that had made a pit stop not to pick up a penalty. Lee making his drive-through penalty there. as Herrera pulled away. Next up was Ovi to make a stop from 5th place. This would have been, although with the stops it was probably 3rd or so. Unfortunately, Ellis was still in his pit box when Ovi arrived, so he had to queue ever so slightly whilst Ellis made his way out. And then the 3rd driver to pick up a penalty was of course Ovi, who accelerated away too early once again. Larsen then pitted from the lead, as James Reed had already been lapped by this point after his first lap contact with Nigel Lee. So it was now down to Ellis to either resume 2nd or take 1st at this point. And as it so turned out, it would mean that Ellis took the lead because Larsen was another driver to incur a penalty. Herrera up above him actually took a drive-through penalty there instead of a stop and go, so he later found himself having to make another stop. This is Sim Steele making his way into pit lane. He was one of the few drivers not to pick up a penalty in this race. And that's James Reed just making a stop up ahead. And here comes Herrera and Larsen to make their stop and go penalties for their pit lane speeding. Looked like it could be difficult for Steele to get out of the pit box at this point because of those two being there, but luckily for him they both moved off before Steele was ready to move off himself. After the stops, Haskell found himself behind Matt Bai, and coming down the start-finish straight he was now easily passed before they even reached the first corner. His next target was Sim Steele. Once again into the first corner he made the move and made it stick. This was the start of a bigger problem for Steele though, as he ran wide. Matt Bai was too far back to capitalise on it though, and at the end of the lap Steele was now under pressure from Matt Bai. By using push to pass to gain an advantage over Steele, and easily overtook him before they reached the first corner. Bai barely managed to get it slowed down and had to jump across the curb, causing Steele to make slight contact with Bai in the middle of the corner. End of that lap now, and Nigel Lee had caught up to Sim Steele. So far Steele had lost 2 positions in 2 laps, and Lee looked like he was going to make it 3 positions in 3 laps. Steele was out quite wide on that final corner, which gave Lee the opportunity he needed to make the move in the slipstream. He moves over to the right hand side of the track. Steele got himself all crossed up under braking and hit the outside wall on the first corner, and that allowed Lee to take the position much easier than he would have done. But at the end of that lap Lee had a compromised exit coming onto the start-finish straight, and Steele was given the opportunity. The only problem was Lee was defending heavily on the inside of the corner. Apparently this was no problem for Steele though, as he drove completely around the outside of Lee to make a beautiful move into the first corner. Lee thought about fighting back and coming into the next corner. It looked like he may well do as he moved over to the inside of the track. Steele locked the brakes and went wide, and that allowed Lee back past. On to the second round of pit stops now then, and Ellis, who was still leading at this point with a comfortable 30 to 40 second lead, was the first one of the front runners to make his way into pit lane. Steele made a mistake towards the end of the lap, and that allowed Lee and Ovi past him. And whilst all that was kicking off, Askov was doing something a bit more spectacular. Coming into the right-hander at the end of the lap, and he got it all completely wrong, hit the wall hard. And now there goes Herrera, but as he rejoins the track, Matt Bai is coming around the corner and is left with absolutely nowhere to go. Running straight into the back of Askov. That ended Askov's race, and Bai did manage to carry on. Lee was next to pit from what would have been third place at this point. Steele out wide on that corner, almost spinning. A lap later, and Matt Bai went for a spin again. Luckily managed to keep it out the wall. Whether or not he had sustained any damage in the contact with Askov, we're not sure. Nikovi, who was now third, took his second pit stop of the day, which allowed Steele past him. Larsen was next to pit a lap later from second place. Bai was currently third now after all the pit stops, and he was now making his second stop. Unfortunately, it wasn't his last of the day, and he had to make a quick splash and dash on the very last few laps of the race as he failed to put in enough fuel at this stop. It was close between Bai and Lee coming out of the pits, and Bai, who was on fresh but cold tyres, made a mistake coming out the second part of the first corner. Bai then moved over to try and let Ellis through, who was laughing at this point, and Lee took full advantage of that to get in the slipstream and go right round the outside at the next corner, but he locked the brakes and was way wide and way too deep. There was almost contact between the two. Bai took the inside for the next corner, but by the time they got there, Lee had managed to get back on it and into the inside. Bai had run out of road, and at this point decided it'd be safer if he just let Ellis through rather than risking any sort of penalty. Steele, who had made his way up into third place now because of pit stops, was next to enter pit lane. Steele was driving a pretty good race so far, but unfortunately his pit strategy would make sure he didn't finish on the podium. As he exited the pits, it was close between Lee, Bai and Steele. Steele managed to slot himself in between Lee and Bai, and this started something which went on for quite a while between Bai and Steele. Bai got a good run into Steele into the next corner and took the inside line, but he went too deep. May have been slight contact there. Steele tries to do the switcheroo but can't quite make it. Bai sporting damage from various different incidents at some point through the race. Steele tries to get around the outside of Bai into the hairpin, but that wasn't going to work. There's almost contact between the two on the exit of the corner, and as they come into the fast left right-hander, Steele wisely decides that he should probably let Bai take the position. He's got opportunity later on. He doesn't need to go and crash it now. Steele makes a move down the inside. On the last corner, he's through. But Bai's got a better exit and possibly using push to pass right now. He's in the slipstream. And moves towards the inside, right slightly later than Steele does. Does he get it slowed down in time? No, he doesn't. He bounces across the curb. Steele avoids contact this time though. Bai starting to pull away now, as Lee makes a big lock up ahead of them. However, Steele is much quicker than Bai in the last two sectors of the lap. And as they're coming into the end of the second one, Steele starts to pull back the advantage that Bai had. No room to get through there. But that doesn't mean Steele won't try. Bai gets slightly sideways on the exit, compromising his speed coming into the fast left right hander. And he's out wide. He's got the line completely wrong. That's going to slow him down on the exit. And here comes Steele. He's having a look into the final corner again. Almost contact between the two. And Steele's retaking the position. These guys were fighting over 5th place, which is worth 2 points. Like it was the race victory or something. Bai then had the better run onto the start-finish straight and took the position once again going into the first corner. Steele is going to have to try something different if he wants to keep hold of that position. Bai once again struggling to keep it on track, and there's contact between the two again. No room for Steele to go to the inside this time. He's a bit too far back. Although he's rapidly catching on Bai in this second sector yet again. Bai makes a mistake coming into the hairpin, and that forces him out way wider than he's ever been. Steele still can't make an advantage of this though. And it looked like Bai had finally managed to keep the position ahead of Steele. And as they came into the final corner, Bai braked in a bit too late and ran wide. Steele went straight back past. However, Bai managed to get himself a much better run than Steele did coming down the start-finish straight, and went to the inside to immediately retake the position before they'd even reached the first corner this time. He's locking the brakes again, but this time he does manage to make it round the corner safely. Steele really needs to make the move coming into the first corner instead of the last one, because Bai gets a much better exit. Steele still pressuring Bai though. Another brake lock off from Bai. And Steele's trying to go with a better run coming into the left hand hairpin again. Still can't find a way past though. And this time Bai braked a bit too late, which caused him to go way out wide. And that eventually allowed Steele to take the position from Bai and take 2 points. By this point there was only a minute and a half of the race left, and Ellis, who had led comfortably after Larsen's penalty for speeding in the pit lane, took his second race win in a row after a great drive. Herrera finished down in 8th and last position, I do believe it was. Larsen took second, about 25 seconds behind Ellis. 4th went to Nigel Lee. Great drive from him to take 3 points. Steele came home in 5th to take 2nd points and a well-deserved take 5th place and 2 points after a well-deserved drive. Bai took 6th and 1 point again. And then the last car was Nick Obi, who took 3rd place. And that's about it. and we will see you at the next race at Vero Park next week.